I really love the conversation we had today on the podcast with Sarah Wildeman. She has a business called Our Common, and it's all about connection and community. And we dove into some juicy places in the conversation around agreements, around questions that should be asked in relationships that often aren't. And actually, just before she left, this isn't on the podcast, she asked a question that she says to people she works with, and it was, what are you planning to avoid in this conversation today? And I felt like that was too good not to share. And there's some other really amazing, very purposeful questions inside this podcast. I think you get a lot out of it. If you want to learn about relationships more, about yourself more, and how to be in community, this is the one for you. I hope you enjoy it. Thank you. So much intentional energy that is built here.
Their body can function again. It can breathe again. It can move energy and oxygen.
But the treatment book is like this, like it's massive. I've met so many patients over the years who were not living lives with vitality. They were living, but it wasn't vital.
Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
And I'd love it if you would introduce yourself, or even if you pretend that nobody has seen or heard of you before, to kind of just start in on that, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, well, I'm Sarah. We've met before. My work is really oriented around right relatedness between all things. So I love, again, that we started from this place of tuning into ourselves, the relationship with ourselves, and how that is connected and interplays with our relationships with each other and our relationship with place and with the land, with the earth, the natural communities that we're a part of, and how that interplays with our relationship with ourselves and our relationship with each other, and how all of those things are connected to our relationship with the whole. So that's, my work is expressed through coaching and workshops and retreats and that sort of thing. But at the piece that undergirds it is that belief around the interconnectedness of all things. And so a lot of it orients around community tending and relational, interpersonal dynamics, because that's often a piece that people bump up against in their real life, maybe in a more conscious way. They realize, oh, I'm struggling in my relationships with the people at my workplace or in my home life. And so that might be the place they start in terms of coming to my work, looking to engage. And of course, we draw in all those pieces of the work.
Wow.
Well,
I don't know about you. I've never had any relational issues.
That's right.
Never any workplace issues, no relational dynamics, interpersonal stuff.
No.
Totally good there. And I do think that really at the core of it, the relationships we have are the most important things in life. And sometimes, the greatest connection, experience, love, witnessing each other, the power and the potency of that, and also the greatest challenge.
Yeah.
And the greatest level of difficulty, because it pulls on everything within all of us as human beings. And so maybe let's go into right relationship a little bit first.
Yeah.
If people have never heard that before, I'd love to hear, what does that mean? What does right relationship mean to you?
Yeah, what a beautiful question. Oh, and it's interesting actually that you call out that word, because oftentimes, when I'm working with individuals, we're orienting away from labeling things as good or bad or right or wrong, and just getting curious about what is. And yet that kind of right relatedness or well relating or whole ways of relating are often words that I do use around, again, our relationship with ourselves or the land or each other. And part of that is around that feeling of, all is well. And that doesn't mean that all is at ease, and it doesn't mean that there is lack of conflict or even lack of mystery or inquiry or uncertainty, because often those things are present in the complex dynamics and dance that is relationship with one another. And yet there's that something within yourself that is like, it's okay. There's an okayness and a wellness, a rightness in being here, being in this dynamic. And we notice that as different than relationships where there is really deep like trauma or harm or abuse or something like that, where that's clearly okay, that's outside of that feeling of well relating.
Yeah.
And so as we move towards right relating, or that feeling of like, oh, all is well, it requires a stretching of our capacity, a building of our skills a lot of the time,
Yeah.
to be in the uncertainty, to be in the conflict. But we're able to sustain that or be in that while still feeling connected to that
Oh yeah, for sure.
thing in ourselves. Does that,
Yeah, I
feel
think
free to riff off that.
the thing I feel with what you shared is there's like a groundedness to it,
Yes.
and alignment
Yeah.
is a word that came in, like aligned relationships. And the curious part about it is because I see patients in the clinic all the time, that I'll ask them about aspects of their life and even aspects of their body, symptoms, different things like that. I'm like, oh well, yeah, that's normal. Like there's nothing going on there. And then I get really curious, what does normal mean?
Right.
And what I've learned about that is everybody's orientation to the different words, even right relationship, or that's normal or aligned or whatever, might be completely different.
Yes.
A regular one is menstrual cycles.
Yep.
Chinese medicine, we look a lot at that. We get trained in that a lot. It's a really great way to tune into like what's going on in the body, imbalanced or not. And that is actually something that when I'm asking patients about it, they'll say, oh, no, that's normal. And I'm like, yeah, but what's normal for you?
Yes.
And then they'll start sharing all these really intense, challenging symptoms.
Yeah.
And in Chinese medicine, that's not normal. That means there's disturbance in the body, or there's things that could come into a greater level of harmony.
Yeah.
So I definitely think about that in relationships where somebody's usual sense of connection might not be that healthy.
Yes.
Or it might not be in a state of wellness in the way that it could be, but they may not know any different.
Yes. Thank you for naming this, because I think what you're speaking to is the way the overculture or the context in which we've grown up might inform our understanding of wellness or of normalcy, or even that kind of what's familiar to our own nervous system, and reorienting into terms of like how I love the example actually of the menstrual cycle, because I was raised in the 90s in Western white culture that was told a very particular thing about, this like it sucks to be a woman sort of orientation. And as I've, expanded my understanding of what it is to be in a female body in the world, has certainly been this interesting exploration around like, oh, actually I want to reorient how I relate to that, the cycling part of myself. And as I reorient and expand and create more room for actually a welcoming of all the parts of myself, the more, I'm sure you see this with clients, the symptoms shift, the experience of that shifts, because I'm oriented towards it differently, which is similar in our relationships. So, if we grew up in a really conflict averse environment, for example, where it's like conflict didn't happen, then for a lot of folks, you encounter a difference of opinion. And even if it's happening in a respectful way, it's like the system is like, oh my gosh, this possibly can't be right relatedness. This is like, but as we can expand and orient towards relationships in this way you're talking about, as being this thing that grows us and stretches us in who we are and is such a part, I believe, of our spiritual paths, then we can start to see, oh, this conflict, this difference of opinion, or this difference between us is arising to invite us into deeper understanding of each other, deeper understanding of ourselves, more openness, more curiosity, more capacity to be with discomfort. And as we reorient or we hold it or frame it differently, then our system is able, actually, the symptoms of being in that conflict feel different to our nervous system. We can settle into it and be like, okay, what's here for me? And in relationship, ultimately that often takes, I don't want to say that everyone in the system needs to be at the same place, because often we help each other in process in relationship, but it certainly does require at least a willingness to orient towards those things in a similar kind of way, or a similar kind of receptivity or openness for our relational dynamics to shift towards those ways of, again, what I would call right relating, like being in the learning
Yeah.
of the relational space and being
Yeah.
in that.
There's so much learning in that, right? When we have, in a relationship where there's two people, their backgrounds could be so different. They might speak English, like they might speak the same language, but not the same language at all from
Yes.
an experiential point of view of how they were raised.
Yeah.
And I experienced that in the past for sure. And
Yeah.
you named it. I was in a conflict avoidant environment for a long time. And
Yeah.
so I didn't really understand conflict
Yeah.
or how to be in it or how to
Yeah.
like argue effectively, or, they talk about like fighting effectively.
Yeah.
And still with love and kindness and compassion and care, but where you can actually still stay in the conversation versus
Yeah.
avoiding or shutting down completely, because I didn't really have any skill sets in that.
Yeah.
And then in a past relationship, they had huge skill sets in that, but not in other places.
Yeah.
So it seemed like we were speaking different languages, and I couldn't really understand what was happening for them, and they couldn't really understand what was happening for me, because it was so far apart. And maybe they grew up in a household that yelling was normal,
Yeah.
and they were kind of fighting and scrappy all the time,
Yeah.
but it was still accepted as normal. Whereas if that happened in my family dynamic growing up, that would be like so intense.
Yeah.
And bridging that divide or bridging that gap took a long time. And it eventually happened in different ways, but it wasn't until I started understanding that. I just thought,
Right.
oh, why does this person want to have conflict all the time?
Yeah.
But that was actually just part of their way of communicating, that's just how they learned.
Yeah.
And then my learning was to never talk about anything.
Right.
Or,
Which is a whole
no,
other
let's not get
reaction.
into, I'm feeling a bit of discomfort, which means we should shut this down.
Yeah.
And again, no fault to anybody involved at any point of my journey. But what I've learned is how to be in conversation different, how to communicate differently. And one of the keys is like, I needed to get in touch with the relationship with me.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize when I started learning a lot of this material years ago, and also as a practitioner and taking courses and seeing tons of patients and starting to get more layers of the dynamic understood, I would learn so much about me. And I realized, I don't really have a close relationship with me. I don't know what I'm feeling. I don't know why I'm feeling it. Maybe I should start there, because I would hyper focus on everybody else and got really good at that. I know a lot of practitioners have that particular sentiment that they do want to be of service, but it's also sometimes an avoidance tactic to not go in here. And so that's been a big journey that is ongoing all the time, but I do have a lot better sense of how I feel when I'm feeling something. I can be with it, even if it's uncomfortable. I still probably have a tendency to avoid different things. And I can see that I'm doing it, and I'll come back around to it much quicker. But my goodness, what a learning.
What a learning. And I love that you, again, point back to this relationship with self piece. A lot of folks will say, well, that's where you have to start. You have to start with the relationship with yourself. And I think a lot of people get hung up or stuck feeling like, I need to do all my inner healing and, get perfected inside, find my true self. And then I'm allowed to be in relationship. Then I'm allowed to explore being in meaningful or profound relational experiences. And yet you said it so beautifully that it's an ongoing process. We often begin with some piece of awareness and self-reflection that then opens us to be in relationship. And then the relationship reveals back to us the pieces that we need to be learning. I think the best and healthiest relationships are where everyone is orienting back to that self-reflection of what is this encounter? Maybe this thing I'm frustrated about, what is it revealing about me? What is it revealing about the values I hold, the expectations I'm carrying, the requests I have or haven't made, the beliefs I have about myself or about relationship or about each other. And if we're all oriented that way, it profoundly shifts the way those interdynamics go, right? And as you were talking, at one point you were talking about conflict, and you mentioned doing it with love and kindness. What happens if we show up that way? And I think sometimes these conversations can feel a little abstract, and people are like, yeah, but how do I do it? Often people come for the skills, the communication skills, and those are important, right? The language, and a lot of folks end up in relational therapy, and it's really orienting around the tools and the practices and the language. And I believe if we can practice connecting in, what does it feel like in my body when I'm connected into, you use the words love and kindness. I often use curiosity and compassion as good anchors, but you could pick anchors that are true for you, that feel really resonant for you. What does that feel like? Where do I really experience that? Maybe it is alone in the forest. What does that, go there, connect to it, feel it, and then have that place that you can hold on to in yourself. Can I stay in this conflict and continue to hold on to in myself that feeling of curiosity and compassion? And can I access it here even now in this conflict that feels uncomfortable, by letting part of myself stay anchored there? And if in my body, and then even in my posture and my orientation, my presence, I can stay connected to that, chances are, even if I fumble the words a little bit, or I didn't actually perfectly nail the formula, it's going to go better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think so many people, and I'll speak for me as well, that with the perfection pieces or some of those beliefs or programs or things that we may not say
Yeah.
what we really think or what we really feel because we don't want to get it wrong.
Yeah.
We want to be right or in right relationship or deliver something in the best way possible, but then it often doesn't get delivered because we didn't reach that, when I can do this, then I'll share.
Yeah.
Or when this happens, then I'll get into a relationship. Or when I've healed all of my wounds fully, then I can go back into the world and connect with people. And I've seen it a lot with patients. I've had lots of reflection time for myself around some of those things of, I could see why I didn't share in this particular place or why I didn't share in that particular place. And, I need to get in touch more with what's going on because maybe in one circumstance, I didn't actually know what I was experiencing.
Yeah.
Or I didn't slow down enough to actually see what is happening for me. And maybe in another place, I didn't think I'd be able to say it or communicate it very well, so then I just didn't.
Yeah.
And so what I've learned is we get to practice these things and to give ourselves permission and others to have it be a bit messy, to not deliver it perfectly or articulate. And I've had great friends conversations lately too. And one friend in particular, she was saying, I don't think I really explained myself very well. And my experience was, I thought you explained yourself beautifully. It's really interesting that you thought you butchered that complete, delivery of what you were trying to share. And I'm sitting over here being like honored and privileged to hear such a beautiful communication. Yeah. And then how we think about ourselves and what we think is actually happening. And sometimes there's a decent gap there. Yeah. And there's lots of questions that come up around this because it all comes back to relationship and community. And this is something we're both passionate about. This is why I do big events. Yeah. It's why I work in the clinic and all the different things in between is like connecting with people is, I think, one of the greatest gifts. And as humans, there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of things that can come up. Yep. With a lot of the work that you've done, whether it's like one-on-one or groups because I know you work with like organizations and businesses and all kinds of things and maybe like couples and families. What would you say you've seen or learned around like what is it that triggers the fear in people the most?
I mean, it so often comes back to that sense of worth or belonging. When we talk about secure attachment, often that is it. Like, is my belovedness at stake here? Like, as a being walking through the world. And so often if you pull back the layer, what's getting in the way? Well, I'm afraid they're going to be upset. Well, what would happen if they were upset? Well, if they were upset, I would feel bad. Okay, well, what would happen if you feel bad? Like you keep pulling back if they're upset and I feel bad, we might not be connecting as much. Okay, well, what's the story or the belief around if you're not connecting as much? What's under there? And so often it just comes back to this, like, I might feel like I'm not enough, or just like the fear ultimately of being alone. It's really as simple as that. you label it rejection, you label it abandonment, you label it rupture, you label it whatever. At the root of it, there's this fear of like, what if I'm find myself totally alone? Which again invites us back into that relationship. Are we ever really totally alone? That relationship with the self and with place.
Yeah.
And anchoring, again, I really believe in like when we can anchor into relationship with the whole, being part of it. Again, that way of being connected helps us show up to those conversations in a different kind of way. And it's not necessarily that we then get the language perfect, but it's that there's something in us. And you see it for folks who've often been through large relational rupture. They've had a marriage end that they thought never would. They've imagined a future for themselves where this relationship is connected, like through and through, and then something happens where they experience like the worst fear, so to speak, the loss of what they believed in a relational space, and they find themselves experiencing maybe for a moment something that feels like aloneness, and then they find out what it is to belong to themselves and belong to the greater whole, and then that healing connects to relationships with others. They probably find other community members or friends that show up for them and meet relational needs in other ways. And that web of connection helps to bolster. And to be honest, if we haven't had relational rupture or experiences of relational loss, in some ways the fear is greater, right? Because often the thing we really fear is, will I be able to handle, not just will it happen, but will I be able to handle it if it happens?
Yeah.
Or how will I handle it if it happens? And I think when we've seen ourselves go through a hard thing in a relationship, in any kind of relationship, it bolsters us. It builds us up to know, okay, I can weather the conflicts or the discomforts. And I do believe it's one of the reasons people are more afraid of conflict in friendships or in kind of like neighborly relationships or more community-oriented relationships than they are maybe even in a workplace relationship where there's some shared commitment to the work, which has some inherent feeling of security, of commitment to each other. Like we can have a difference, but we'll work it out because there's this other overarching thing that connects us. Or even in romantic partnership or in a marriage context, as an example, where somebody has created sort of an anchoring agreement to work things through or be committed to each other, or with some families of origin, not all families of origin, where there's that feeling of like, we're each other's people, we're going to sort it out. There can be more comfort or less fear around going to those uncomfortable places.
Yeah.
And yet for a lot of folks, and in our world, a lot of folks, it's like, you see the culture of like love and light only. It's like, well, then if a friendship is painful or you disagree or somebody hurts your feelings, there can be this real fear of like, if I raise this or we go into this, there's no security that this friendship is held true. And so, I think you see those fears surface for different people in different kinds of ways. But does that resonate for you?
Yeah, there's a few pieces. I want to touch on the aloneness part and secure attachment and what happens in these spaces in between. And a memory is coming up around a past relationship I had with somebody, and, it was an intimate partnership. And I think in a lot of cases, in the growth and the learning of that relationship, and really grateful that we both wouldn't really share the full truth.
Yeah.
And when we get deeper and deeper into that, it's like, oh, because I'm afraid if I do, they're going to leave.
Yeah.
I'll lose this person. I can't really share how I feel fully because this will happen. And then at the end, then I'll be alone.
Yeah.
But it's not often conscious at the time. That's more like retrospective. Oh, I could totally see why that would happen in their behavior and in my behavior is from that love and care and compassion for each other. we're going to keep this going, so maybe we're not going to bring everything to the table. But then you can, over time, if you're growing an attachment with somebody and there's that safety enough to be able to share. But at some points, you almost do have to risk the loss of a relationship to be in the truth.
Yeah.
And I think that's the part that I didn't want to face at times in the past, so that I wouldn't share that, because I could see the outcome.
Yep.
Oh, this might happen. And then in some cases it did. And then my, my fear was realized, but then I was okay. Yeah. And then realizing, oh, I could be okay, gave me a better foundation for any other relationships that I would be in, because I felt more resourceful internally by having faced the fear, went through it, and then there's a capacity that grows. Yeah. So I feel like there's a few threads here that we could weave together around facing the fear of aloneness. And for, speaking of that, of how does one do that? Because there's probably a lot of people that are going to listen to this that feel quite alone, even in a room of people. Yeah. Even with hundreds of people or thousands of people, it could feel really alone. And that has been me at times, for sure. Yeah. I felt alone in relationships. I felt alone professionally at times. And I'm like, oh yeah, there's actually a lot of aloneness that I've spent time with and worked my way through it in different ways. And I know there's some gifts in the aloneness. But also, what do you see as maybe some of the skill sets that you teach with to help people build secure attachment, which I'm imagining could help them be with the threats or the fear of the aloneness? Because that could also change the dynamics of the relationship massively. And maybe one more piece, I'm adding a few layers here. After that relationship ending that I'm referring to, we actually both ended up having way more candid conversations of sharing some of the deeper truths and insights and everything else, because the threat of losing the relationship was kind of gone because we had already split. Yeah. And then you realize, like, oh, I could say this because we already broke up. Yeah. And then realizing how much freedom there was in that, of like, how come we couldn't do that in relationship? Oh, the fear. Yeah. The fear would be there. Yeah. And maybe it was meant to be aligned or not aligned for a period of time, and then, kind of completes itself. But I could really see the growth and the learning in that, even just for me. And then I could start to see that in so many relationships. Yeah. Oh, there's so many things in there. We feel like we could have gone 20 different directions. Yeah, I'm all over the place. Maybe I'll speak to one thing, and then maybe you can give me the question back again. But one of the pieces you spoke about here, and we're talking about secure attachment, we're also using this language of, you use this language of safety in relationship. And it's one I encounter a lot in my work, especially in the community tending aspects of my work. So for context, I lived in intentional community for close to a decade before we moved into our current neighborhood. And one of the roles I played in one of the communities we lived was really a community tending role. We had a international internship program where people would come and stay for 3 months. And so my role was to be a bridge between the long-term living community and this short-term living community, and help them develop a sense of community amongst themselves, but also help them to integrate into the broader community. And I can't count the number of conversations I had with individuals, especially at the early stages of that kind of like storming, forming stage of becoming a group together, that folks would come and say, I don't know that I feel totally like safe to fully be myself yet. This is the language people would use. Yeah. People would, all kinds of different people would use the same language. And my question is always, what does safe mean? Kind of like you asked at the beginning, what does normal mean? What does it mean to be safe in relationship? What are we talking about? You see this, in women's groups, or you run a group program, I'm sure like that experience where people are kind of at the beginning, like, is it safe to fully be me? And of course there are those, and I really want to honor this, like, who have experienced marginalization, where that safety question is actually like a real and tangible, like physical safety inquiry. And that's really important to acknowledge in the context of this conversation. But a lot of the time, folks are naming that safety piece, and what they're talking about is, if I reveal all of myself, if I bring the vulnerable parts, or if I speak the truth that I'm kind of sitting on, will I still be wanted? Will I still belong? Will I still be welcome here? And
so I think it's helpful not to answer the question for folks, but just to raise that question around safety. Because again, just like that normalcy thing or that wellness thing, we might orient to that word differently and differently in different contexts.
For sure.
And given different backgrounds and in different relational spaces. My husband and I, we've been together 18 years now, which feels crazy. And every year we do we do a lot of relational check-ins, but on our anniversary, we do like a bigger check-in. And one of the questions we always ask is like, if there's a word, something you'd want more of in the year ahead, what would it be? And I feel like it was around the 9-10 year mark. I really distinctly remember that we both used this word, safety. I want more safety in the relationship. We'd been married 10 years. It's like, okay, I want more safety. And we had this conversation around well, what do you even mean by safety? And there was a number of reasons I was feeling in more of an insecure moment. And the definition I felt was I need you to tell me or promise me you're never going to want X, Y, Z, and he was like, I can't promise or guarantee that. I can't give you that version of safety. And the version of safety he asked for was I need to know the relationship is safe enough that I can bring any request. I can name any, noticing any truth that's coming up in me and know that you're willing to meet me in it. Not necessarily to give me what I'm asking for or to accept the thing that's coming up in me, but I need to know there's enough safety here that any truth can be spoken. Mm-hmm. And I remember being humbled, being yeah, that's a better version of safety for this relationship to be whole and functioning. But often, we think security or secure attachment or safety in relationship is this promise that it will always be okay, or that I'm always going to feel the way I feel. It's we cannot make those promises. And so if we're attached to that version of safety, it feels very disorienting, or it absolutely is terrifying to encounter uncomfortable truths in ourselves or in each other.
This is so juicy. I'm so glad that you went to the safety piece, because I also think this is a really hot topic in relational fields right now and languaging. And I'm really grateful that there's been so many amazing teachers and books and authors of so much learning around relational dynamics, safety, nervous systems, tremendous people. And what I'm curious about now at this phase is when people learn the languaging around different systems, even anxious attachment avoidance, but maybe don't understand it fully, but start inserting that into different areas of life, but maybe don't have a grasp of it. And there's lots of times I know I've done that. And even with things like human design or gene keys, in some conversations, people sort of weaponizing the shadows. Oh, that's your anxious attachment coming out, or that's your shadow of this and this, and starting to kind of leverage it in unhelpful ways because there's a trigger or it's very alive. And I've been in conversations where maybe somebody says, oh, I don't really feel safe with you right now. And I get really curious is what is that about? And I mean, there's 100 stories I could share. And in some cases, it was because I asked a really uncomfortable question.
Yeah.
How do you really feel about this thing specifically? Yeah. And then there's discomfort and avoidance or whatever it might be. And there's no judgment around that. But that could trigger the feeling of not being safe because I'm asking for truth. Yeah. And how 100 different lenses could look at those types of circumstances and label it one way or label it another way. Whereas in my nervous system, I was a bit confused by that. What do you mean unsafe? We're just in a conversation. There's no harm going on, but the fear of going deeper, then that was the reaction or the response. And so we're using some really interesting words today. There's a lot that comes up around what's normal, what's right, what is safe, what isn't safe, and ultimately, that's going to be that individual's experience. Yeah. But I do see it getting kind of distorted and skewed at times, and I know this happens in my own system. And even things like commitment in relationships, or in some cases in a relationship, somebody I want more commitment. then I'll feel safer. And it's like, well, what do you mean by that?
Yeah.
What would more commitment look like? And so I've been playing around with these types of words as well. Work, friendships, relationships of all kinds, maybe agreements are a place to go. Mm-hmm. Like, what does commitment look like for you? Because that could be completely different for one person, because I've also seen people that were very, very committed, but committed to the dysfunctional patterns that they had always been running, but that made them feel secure. And it gave them a sense of certainty, even though it was completely dysfunctional. And I'm like, this is so fascinating. We're so fascinating as humans to kind of study ourselves and study other people. And there's so much to open up around that. So yeah, just kind of curious where you want to go next with that. And I can narrow it down for sure, because we're putting a lot on the table, but just,
well, there's
just
so
trust
much,
what you...
There's so much good stuff here. And you pointed towards agreements. And earlier you asked, what's one of the tools that you might bring into relationship tending spaces? And in particular, both when I'm working with a pair and with a team, one of the foundational tools I work with is this concept of relationship by design, and agreements. Creating some shared agreements in a relational space is a big piece of that. Mm-hmm. So before I go there, I do want to name what you were speaking to around the safety and like that activation of like, whoa, this feels unsafe. And just, it's such a nuanced topic, but safety in part, at least just like secure attachment, is at least in part an inside job. It's a thing we do for ourselves, create that sense of security or that sense of safety. And again, I want to like context, I'm not talking about like true systems of harm or abuse, but in, like in a relationship where it's like, whoa, I'm suddenly thinking you don't like me and now it doesn't feel safe, or that you're going to reveal something to me, recognizing. And it's nuanced because, of course, in relationship, it's important to care about, not to take care of what you're feeling or be responsible for what you're feeling. That's verging into codependency. But actually to be mindful of my impact, to be aware of, and especially in personal relationships where we know each other and we know something might be activating or triggering, or, for myself, like my kids, like we don't use loud tones really in our house. We use pretty gentle tones. So if my tone is like firm with them, they're like, oh my gosh, you're yelling. I'm like, I'm not yelling, but my tone, I'm aware that what activates them. And so I can be sensitive or mindful of those things in that relational space. So I just want to name that because it's so nuanced, and we could pick that conversation back up around safety and what it looks like both to be attentive to without taking care of each other's emotional experiences. But this relational agreements piece, I think, is so key. And part of it starts by having some understanding. And again, this might feel like overly, I don't know, almost like it can feel a little extractive when we frame it this way, but like, what is the purpose of this relationship, or even of this interaction, this conversation? And when you think of yourself in the the practitioner seat, I don't know if you refer to yourself as a doctor in a doctor seat, but, and somebody else is in a patient seat, what is the purpose of that dynamic, that relationship in that moment, right? And it's for the revealing of what's going on for them. It's for the serving and helping to move that individual towards their healing and to offer your expertise. And it's got a different purpose than when you're having coffee with a buddy, chatting about your lives. The purpose of that relationship might be shared understanding, witnessing, feeling of connection, support. The roles and the seat you're sitting in those contexts is different. You might even have that same buddy come to your office as a patient. Now actually that you've got two different relationships with two different purposes, and probably there's baked into them different agreements. And we do this usually subconsciously. We have these agreements. Oh, over here, it's like totally appropriate to spend a lot of time talking about me because we're in this space. But, for me with clients, and I do have clients that I have relationships with outside of the coaching relationship. And then, we're really clear about the agreements that when we're in the coaching relationship, the focus is on them, moving them forward with their clarity, who they want to be in the world, what is it they're trying to learn about themselves, and the attention and the focus is on those things. And when we're outside of that space, like what's going on for me is also fair game, because there's a different agreement. And you can absolutely, it's so powerful in those relationships that we're actually trying to do big work in, whether it's a working relationship or a family relationship or an intimate partnership or a close friend that we're committed to doing life and learning alongside, to have the conversation of like, what does it mean to be committed to this friendship? Or if we're agreeing, like, let's commit to creating a culture together. You know, agreements is similar to like the culture we're creating. A culture of respect. Okay, well, what does respect mean to you and respect mean to me? For me, respect means like showing up as equals. It doesn't, a lot of people think about respect as like treating each other as authority. You know, it's like, okay, let's actually get into that so that we can be on the same page. And then my favorite agreement, which I bake into all agreements, is the agreement to redesign or revisit the agreements as needed. And recognizing that relationships are iterative, and who we are is iterative. We're growing and changing, and
we're so dynamic.
The dynamics are changing. And so this isn't like creating a contract necessarily, but it is providing some framework and guidance for you. And then those agreements, when we have them in place, become the thing that we can rest or lean back into, that holds us in the space. If you and I have an agreement that it's okay to disagree on something, and we're aware of that doesn't mean that we can't connect or be friends, then when we disagree, we can be like, oh, right, we have this agreement. It's okay. I can rest into that, and I can then lean into curiosity. Instead of just like
it opens
bracing.
Like a space of freedom and spaciousness. To go into different things. And so the question you shared earlier, I think that a lot of people don't ask. And there's so many times as you're speaking about that, I'm thinking back to past relationships. I never really asked that question. What's the purpose of this relationship? And so we often go into things unintentionally or just not very intentional. There might be like a lighthearted, oh, well, I'm interested in that person or whatever. Let's just see what happens. But there may not be a very clear path there, or then the set of agreements never gets spoken to. It's all assumed or unconscious, and that's where I find huge gaps happen because people can be coming from very different places thinking they're on the same page. And I've met lots of couples or worked with families and they're like, oh no, we don't talk about religion. I'm like, you guys have been married for 40 years and you don't talk about religion? Aren't you curious about what your lifelong partner thinks and feels about these things? Is like, no, we've agreed to not go there. I'm like, okay, interesting. Like if that works for you. I'm fascinated by that. And a funny analogy came up as you were talking about agreements. I played hockey, played at junior level, college level, pretty high level. And I remember this one game, we were in it intensely, rival team, pretty rough, pretty scrappy, and it was something. It was something to be a part of. And I was at the age, I was over 18 in Alberta. You could go to the bar after, and we went to the bar and the other team was there. And a bunch of us ended up hanging out and having a beer together, but in the game, fighting. And so I was like, oh, that's an agreement. When we're on the ice, you guys are the adversaries, and we're going to do everything we can to win. And we will defend and stand up for everything we need. And it could get rough, and I might fight you, actually, or whatever that would be. I'm going to try and take you out, or you're going to try and take me out. But a different arena, socially, the agreement changed to, oh, hey, I have respect for you. That was a good game. You really hit me pretty good there, and I gave it back to you, and you kind of laugh about it and have a beer. And looking back now, I was like, because the context was different. The space was different, and it wasn't necessarily agreed upon at the start of the game. That'd be pretty funny. Hey, do you guys agree that we'll fight tooth and nail to the death? And then afterwards, do you agree that we'll just be social and have a beer together and maybe even become friends, but we could be rivals on the ice? It's not always spoken to. And so even in workplaces, it's almost easier, I think, because you have a designated role. I'm the IT guy, I'm this or that, and it's more explicit. But this is my curiosity in intimate partnerships, friendships, relationships of different versions. can we invite more spoken to shared agreements earlier on to get on the same page? And I wish I would have done that or even known about that in the past. Probably would have saved a lot of difficulty and a lot of heartache.
Well, I love the example you give because, we're laughing about it. And like, okay, you didn't sit down and be like, let's agree to fight to the death. But you did by entering the game, which, everybody knows the agreement is to be in competition. That's the agreement on the ice, to be in competition, to play the game. There's actually a game is as much as a workplace has pretty clear agreements already. In fact, you've got a referee out on the ice who's like, the agreement is if the fight gets this way, I'm going to blow the whistle and put you in a little box. It's actually...
Yeah, we all know the rules. We know the agreements.
Right. It's quite specific. And, you maybe didn't do this, and it sounds like maybe inherently people fell into the shared agreements at the bar, but sometimes people might do something as casual as being like, hey, let's leave our differences on the ice and have a good time tonight. There's a subtle agreement that's happening. It's actually a spoken agreement in that moment to say, hey, who we were on the ice together when we were in competition, let's leave that over there and just let's be buddies. Because sometimes you do see teams that show up at the bar together and get into it after, right?
Yeah,
it's like things
the
escalate.
other agreements are still going on.
The other agreements are still going on. But when you can say to name hey, it's so cool to show up here just all as players who played hard today, you're naming, speaking an agreement into the space that is creating some relational design. And we can do this all of the time. And some people do it without thinking about it. We can be a little more conscious. And I think like anything, at first you're unaware of what you're unaware of. You're like, I've never thought about speaking intention into my relationships. And then maybe initially you start building the skill and thinking about relationship by design. And sometimes it's more formal and you're like, hey, let's let's agree to be in curiosity together in this, or let this relationship be a source of learning in our lives. Or you might do something more formal, but over time you might have the practice of, going out with a buddy after work and being able to say let's leave work at work tonight. There's an agreement there. You're designing into the space. How are we going to be with each other? And what in this moment is the relationship for? Because we all know at work the relationship was. Or you might say in a meeting, you're chit-chatting and, hey, let's get serious for a second and talk about some hard things. Okay, you're creating a little design in that moment that says, hey, let's shift our orientation and drop into the stuff we don't really want to talk about here at work. And I think, using a work example is important because it's one of the places where we might have more nuanced dynamics, especially if we have a culture that's pretty friendly. And or if we've shifted roles over time inside an organization. One of the places I see it get missed the most is when somebody goes from a peer role and then they get promoted and now they're in a supervisory or a managerial role over the team that used to be their peers. And yet there isn't a redesign of the relationship that happens very intentionally a lot of the time. And then that manager is all conflicted inside. It's like, I'm trying to do the thing, but that fear of belonging really kicks in because, we used to just complain about the job together. And now I have to be the one to reinforce the job or inspire the job or motivate the job.
Yeah.
And my role is different, but nobody's made any new agreements around that or agreements around the security of, hey, we can still be friends even if sometimes at work I need to call you out or hold you accountable. And let's talk about how we might do that, what it's going to look like when things get hard. And being able to navigate those different dynamics with the same people is probably the next level skill, right?
Well, especially when we can evolve together. And that's a great example in workplace. I could see that. Yeah. And then I can also see it in partnerships or marriages and things as well, where one person changes a job.
Yep.
Or they change their career completely, and it completely reorients the dynamic of the entire household, the kids, everybody else. Yep. And there's lots of different examples I think we could put on the table around that. And there's this other piece too with what you're speaking to is, and anybody listening, what I would love to invite is the relationships that you're in now, maybe start with the ones closest to home.
Yeah.
What agreements need to be spoken to, or
Yeah.
what agreements are you aware of that might not be conscious?
Yes.
That might be subconscious.
Yeah.
And as a practice to start looking at that, because I think that could bring in a lot more intention, and it may actually bring things to the surface. Because the other thing I've seen, and I've experienced this too in different ways, but especially with clients and patients, where maybe two people get into a relationship, they haven't involved the kids yet.
Yeah.
And maybe they have, kids previously, blended families, whatever. And then once they start blending together, they realize the way that they parent is very different.
Yeah.
And it was never spoken about, or there wasn't a lot of conversation.
Yeah.
And then suddenly they're realizing their beliefs, their thoughts, their values around how things should go could be completely different. And they may have so many points of connection,
Yeah.
but in that different arena, may be completely opposite,
Yeah.
whether it's religious views or health views or whatever it is. And suddenly there's all this conflict. What would you invite, if somebody finds themselves in that type of environment,
Yeah.
or even in the workplace? So what could they be stepping forward to do?
Yeah.
And what could they invite?
Yeah, I think the example you're using here, even of a blended family and stepping into parenting, the question actually, before the question around, well, what's your belief about this and how are we going to parent in these situations, is like, what roles are we each playing in this context? And again, it is looking at that. Now we've got a whole ecosystem of relationship. We're involving the kids. It's a whole system. It's not just two individuals, but what role am I being invited in your kids' lives to play or not play? And what are the agreements we need to have with each other? Not just even like about the differences, but as we encounter those differences. If I see something in your parenting that I disagree with, like what's our agreement with each other around if and how I'll bring that up? And, in a peer-to-peer relationship, it's important that those agreements are co-created. And so what I mean by that is that I really believe you can bring any request to a relationship or share anything that is what's going to work for you. And a co-created agreement is one where you massage that request until it's something that you're like, yeah, okay, that's going to work for both of us. Now, there are certain contexts where there is and I generally don't like systems of hierarchy, but let's be honest, in certain workplaces, for example, the structure is there where it is appropriate for the owner of a business to hire somebody into a role, and there's going to be an agreement around that role, an expectation around the role I'm playing and the role you're playing. Mm-hmm. And it might even be like, hey, if you have an idea about how we're doing things and it's really different, I want to give you permission to bring that forward, to name any idea. And just know, at the end of the day, I'm the one who's going to make the call, right? And so the agreement is there, the understanding is there that the permission to name what's coming up for you is welcome. And you might have a similar agreement in a co-parenting situation, right? A blended family situation. I want to invite you to bring forward whatever thing you're seeing, and they're my kids. So at the end of the day, it's important that I feel comfortable that it gets to be my call, or and different couples are going to come to different places, or different workplaces are going to, but being also, again, it's helpful to put that awareness to the purpose or the nature of the relationship, to recognize what kinds of, and what degree of formality you might put around those agreements, or how much conversation you might have. Sometimes this process is very internal. I'd say one of the most common things people bring up in a coaching session will be especially if I'm working one-on-one, a lot of individuals I work with are working through interpersonal dynamics as well. And they might bring something and say, what do you think? Should I talk to this person about this, or should I bring it up, or should we hash it out? And the question again comes back to, well, what is the, maybe it's not been formal, but what is the purpose of that relationship? What is the existing culture of that relationship? What's the aspirational culture you want to create in that relationship? What agreements are already there? And does the relationship have the capacity for you to navigate this conversation?
Yeah.
And that means, does that relationship hold enough shared agreement to have that conversation? Do you have the capacity? Do they have the capacity? Does the dynamic between you? You see this a lot with adult parent-child relationships, where an adult child, a grown individual has something they want to bring to their parents, and yet the agreements haven't evolved beyond some childhood thing, or the understanding of the purpose of the relationship hasn't been spoken into the space as an evolved thing beyond what it was when they were little. And so before bringing that conversation into the space, there might need to be some work around, like, hey, we've never really talked about the fact that, like, yeah, you're my parent, but also we're both adults, and we have different views on how life should go. And I really want to invite you into the role of being a witness to my life, to being a loving support in my life, to feeling comfortable to share what you see, or and like as an adult now, we've shifted out of the space of you telling me what to do. You might say it in a different way, right? But those agreements often haven't evolved for folks in those familial relationships, such that there needs to be reflection on those things, and sometimes conversation. Again, not all relationships are equipped for that. So sometimes it's just a recognizing, and that helps to inform the discernment process about, okay, do we bring this thing forward and kind of get into it together? Or is this something I work through on my own?
Well, and especially like family of origin probably is where this happens the most. Yeah. And even as I'm hearing you, as a parent, and my kids are teenagers right now, I wonder about that. Like, who are they going to be as adults? And it's exciting, and they're becoming their own people, and they have their own thoughts and ideas around things. And it's a really fun place of growth and curiosity. Yeah. And I've heard this from lots of parents, is like, they're always going to be your kids. Yeah. But can that evolve and grow along with their growth and development, and my growth and development to always be in right relationship, healthy space, where there's a different dynamic, and just being open to that dynamic, because I can see the dynamic already has shifted quite a bit from when they were like 5 years old, 10 years old, 15 years old, 16 years old, driving around with my daughter yesterday. I'm like, this is a different agreement. I'm a passenger now.
I'm a passenger now.
I have never been the passenger in this dynamic before. Yeah. Okay, that's a recalibration. But there's that shared understanding of, yes, you're going to drive right now. Yeah. I'm going to ride, and there's an agreement here that I'm going to guide and coach you, because this is new. Yeah. And I can just see like so many places in life where that gets missed, or where I've missed it in the past. And so, this is so helpful. Yeah. Well, and I love you use this word recalibration. It's so great, because what you're speaking to is some of it is internal. And I think, in a lot of cases, we can just, as parents especially, is a great example where we can allow the agreements to shift by shifting our own orientation, or stepping back a little bit more, or recognizing like, oh, right, my role has shifted. The purpose of this relationship is shifting, as I'm not just trying to keep them alive anymore the way I was when they were a toddler. Actually, my role is to witness and empower. And okay, so actually, because now I'm recalibrating internally to how that purpose is shifting, I'm actually just showing up differently, which makes room for the relationship to grow into that recalibration. And I do really love starting people with just a self-reflection practice around, especially relationships that feel sticky, or where there's resentment that's building, or frustrations, to first just check in. What am I holding as the purpose of this relationship? Is that like the first question? I think it's a great, not necessarily in conversation, but within oneself. Yeah, for yourself. Yeah, I mean, that's so orienting. It's orienting, and I think sometimes people are like, well, a relationship's just a relationship. It doesn't have a purpose, but actually it's evolving, it's changing, it's multiplicitous, and yet it's there, right? And it does change. When my husband and I became parents, suddenly, boom, there's a new purpose to our relationship. We're co-parenting. We're raising and keeping these humans alive. That purpose to the relationship didn't exist prior. So now we have to actually orient to
that new purpose. There's new agreements around that. And a lot of that happened subtly and with time and through the mess of learning together. And yet, as you start to become aware of things, you can just name them into the space. It doesn't have to be this I certainly do hold groups sometimes in a room where we sit down and discuss and massage the agreements and really what does commitment mean here? What are we talking about? What does that look like? How do we know we have it or we don't? What does it feel like? What will we do when we feel it fall out of the room? So sometimes it's that formal, but a lot of the time it's just the noticing that happens and the naming along the way. And I think that question alone, what is the purpose of this, or what am I holding the purpose of this relationship to be right now? And maybe being curious, I wonder what other understandings of the purpose of the relationship are in the space, can totally shift how we show up to a relationship. I have this story that I sometimes share around an extended family member where I found myself consistently feeling misunderstood, not fully seen, not fully accepted. And I was resentful, frustrated, kind of angsty before those interactions and trying to figure out how to make them understand me.
Yeah.
And I stopped and asked myself in some journal time, okay, well, what is the purpose of the relationship? And one way of asking that is just why am I in this relationship? And I was the purpose of this relationship was for me to be seen and known and understood. I probably would have been out a long time ago. That's clearly not the primary purpose of this relationship. The purpose of this relationship is more oriented around family culture and staying connected and being part of a bigger ecosystem, and so that my kids can have relationship with this individual and that there can be that flow. And actually, the reason I'm in this relationship is almost more circumstantial. And so then the question that follows is, what do I want the culture of this relationship to feel like? And being in inquiry, what's really available in terms of the capacity as I understand it within myself and the history and this individual and our existing relationship. And I was I want it to feel friendly and warm. I want it to feel familiar. But actually, I could release this pressure to feel deeply known and understood in this relationship.
Yeah, that wasn't the place to source that.
No, I have a whole host of other relationships that meet me in that deep human need. It's still a real and deep human need. But what if I actually just released that and shifted my orientation to what the purpose of this relationship is, and the culture I want to help to facilitate in the dynamic, and then what role do I need to play? I was I actually just need to be friendly and warm, and it's not inauthentic. It's again, this is maybe a way of using that right relating word. It's showing up appropriately for the context of what the relationship is truly. And that doesn't mean that I'm closing off the possibility that in time that relationship evolves and is iterative and changes, where there opens up opportunity to feel more seen or known. And yet instead, oh my gosh, the weight that lifted and the ease that entered for myself in that dynamic I don't know if they felt anything different at all, but I was able to show up in a way that felt far more generative and life-giving, which is also a good cue of oh, okay, this relationship, it doesn't look as intimate and deep and vulnerable as some other relationships in my life, but it doesn't mean it's an unwell way of relating. It's actually we're showing up in a way that feels more generative, and again, just meeting the capacity of the relationship where it's at without that meaning anything about my worth or theirs.
Yeah. This is, I think, such a key, and I love that story. The meaning that we give to things changes everything.
Yes.
And that's such a beautiful example of surrendering and releasing, but still staying aligned with you.
Yeah.
And then it can shift the space in a really big way.
Yeah.
Because I think some of our belief structures in society and everything else, and I know different stories I've had and patterns, is that that one person or whoever it is in your life needs to check every box for you.
Yes.
And it turns out that's not a really healthy dynamic necessarily. And how could that possibly be true of one person?
Yeah.
And it's why we have different friendships and different dynamics and things, and how beautiful that is. But if we're trying to reduce that one person to fit every box, that does put a ton of pressure on that dynamic, and the energy's got to go somewhere in that. And then, like you said, it's not life-giving necessarily. And maybe it wasn't for them as well, or maybe they weren't even sure, but it sounds like it became more life-giving for you because you changed the meaning and the dynamic of it internally.
Yes.
And that is so powerful.
Yes. I love that. I speak about this in the as an understanding of like understanding the broader ecosystem of our relationships and recognizing exactly what you're talking about. It's like, just like in a forest, there are many niches that different types of plants occupy in our lives. There are many different needs, and some relationships may live in many niches in our broader ecosystem, but rarely does one person live in all of them. And so when we can kind of zoom out and take that bird's eye view and look at the relational needs in our life as a whole and start to get curious just about like, okay, what groups am I part of, or who in my life do I really feel met in this need? And that could be anything from that piece about feeling really known and seen. But for me as an extrovert who loves to just be around people, I also have a relational need around just like being in proximity in a social and fun way with other people. That's like, that goes in my ecosystem. That's a whole kind of box. Or there might be for folks something around deep spiritual connection, and that's the thing they really want to have shared. And okay, there's that need. And then there's practical needs like companionship, those people that my life bumps up against in the day-to-day, or there's practical supports. We are not islands. We need each other for real tangible help. It's the people that help meet us in the parenting, muck of life, or the to-dos of life, and who's helping to show up in that part of the ecosystem. And then can I start to just look at that and beginning, again, when we talked about earlier, how everything kind of if we can come to all of our relational spaces and to the bigger ecosystem from a place of personal curiosity, then we just can look at what's revealed in mapping that all out and say, like, what do I make up about this? Or what's this feel like to me as I look at this and recognize like 3 of my boxes are feeling kind of empty. Yeah. Or, wow, I've got this new appreciation for this individual who's in all of, in a whole bunch of these boxes, who really means a lot to me. I want to invest and express some appreciation back into that relationship. Or, I have a workshop around this practice, and actually a free tool that folks can download on my website around this relationship ecosystem mapping. And I did it recently and had this big aha where I was like, oh, I'm in this group right now. I'm in a few different groups, community groups, because I'm an extrovert and a yes person. So I just keep saying yes to things. But I was like, I'm in this group, and I didn't put it in any of my boxes. Like, it's not particularly filling any of these needs. And so then the question just became, well, why am I in this group? Yeah. Right? And it was like, it didn't have to be adversarial to recognize like, oh, this being part of this group actually just isn't meeting any of the relational needs I've named in my life. And maybe it's something I could simplify and release and, like let somebody else find their way into that group. That's where it's really going to meet a need for them. Or I can get curious and say, well, okay, what is it filling in me? Because maybe it's not a need I first identified, but it's something subtle and below the surface, and it's still important to me for this reason. And can I be honest with myself about what that reason is? So I don't know where we started, but
well, even the relational ecosystem analogy, because in Chinese medicine, we view the body as a garden. And I've always loved that analogy, and I can see how it fits in so many aspects of life and relationships, of course, too. Yeah. And where are you watering the garden? Is it getting enough sunlight and nutrients, and how's the soil and everything else? And we talk about like nourishing the soil before you plant the seed, especially in context of like fertility and things. But I think this isn't true. It is true in every relationship is, the life-giving force, the energy, and as those things connect and converge and align, then there's like so much potency in that. And if it's not, to really just be honest and evaluate and look at that and see like, well, maybe there's a better fit somewhere else, and maybe this is just something I'm going to reorient to myself. So I guess if we would summarize a couple things, that question's sticking with me so beautifully is, what's the purpose of this relationship? If there was a second question that you could kind of orient people to once they've looked at that, what would be the organic flow from that for people that are really diving in and making notes right now of like, oh man, I've got all questions to answer here, but what would be the next step?
Yeah, I mean, I think when really looking at relationship by design, that next piece is like, what is the culture I want to cultivate in this relationship? Or another way of asking that is like, how do I want this relationship to feel? And that's where you start to orient towards like, oh, I just want it to feel like really spacious. Or maybe I want it to feel really rooted. Like those might be different orientations that point you towards different types of agreements. But kind of moving from that place of what's it for to how do I want it to, what do I want it to be like? You know, inside this relationship. And that helps move you to this question of, okay, well, what agreements or requests would I need to make of the relationship to help move it in the direction of that culture? Or where would we need to get clear? Or where is more conversation needed? And maybe not, maybe where is it just a reorientation in myself? And I don't know if this is specific to your question, but this keeps coming up in the back of my head as we're talking, is creating an understanding for ourselves, maybe like in the example I gave with the extended family member, of sometimes there are different capacities or different needs in relationship that don't meet in the middle. And our temptation is to go to this place of being like, you know, maybe I have a big emotional need and the person that I'm bringing that to isn't resourced or doesn't have the skill set or the capacity to hold that and meet me in it. And we can quickly go to this story or this place of like, I'm too much. How often do we hear that in ourselves or from people? Or the fear that, oh no, I'm too much. And the other individual might go to a place of, I'm not enough. Gosh, those are where people go on this spectrum of questioning the worth and the belonging. I'm too much or I'm not enough. And we can make that about our worth. And ultimately, actually, it's not about that at all. Our worth, who we are, like our essence, is not enough or too much or any of it. It just is. And yet there's a real human 3D world practical piece around, and I'm not equipped to meet you here in this need. That's not that your need is too much, but there's actually just a mismatch here. And how can we get you resourced or supported in the broader ecosystem of your relationships to be met in this need? Because right now I'm not. And can we build the skills, which is maybe for those relationships where we have these kinds of more robust agreements with each other to be in the learning of life together, that we can invite each other in to stay anchored in our worth, in our sense of self, in our essence, while getting curious and tending to relationally the things that we might need to be sensitive to or work with in a compromising way or whatnot, right? This isn't just about pointing us towards like, well, this is how I am, take it or leave it, right? Like relationship also has this tenderness and this sensitivity that we need to be in with each other in inquiry. So that feels like a bit of a side piece, but it keeps coming up in the back of my mind as we're talking as an important. Yeah,
very important.
Yeah.
You know, and all these pieces we've talked about already is place of curiosity, inquiry, asking those really good questions. And then there's so much that can be revealed. And then I feel like that can close a lot of gaps where people maybe don't even know that there's gaps until they dive into it. But then it can be tended to, it can be worked on, it can be repaired, decisions and actions can be taken around that.
Yeah.
And that feels ultimately really empowering. And I think this is an undercurrent of our whole conversation is how do we create more empowered and generative relationships with ourselves, with our close people, and then in a broader context of community and groups and businesses. And we're in such a rapidly evolving time of humanity right now. I think these types of conversations are really good to have, and so grateful for being able to dive in with you. And just for the listeners, where can they find more about you? And we'll put this in the show notes and things, but is there anything you want to direct people to?
Thanks for that. I didn't even name it at the beginning. My business is called Our Common, which is meaning both what we have in common and also orienting towards the common every day, the like feet on the ground every day. So Our Common, our-common, and you can find me at our-common.com, on Instagram, our_common. And actually just want to point you towards, in this conversation, there's been a few resources that have come to mind. One is that I have a relationship ecosystem mapping tool that's free, and a free workshop around relationship by design, which is a lot of what we were talking about today. And then a bunch of pre-recorded workshops around doing a relationship audit, how to be in not just the personal inquiry, but the conversation together around purpose and agreements and culture that we're co-creating, walking you through that ecosystem mapping tool. There's a few more that are still coming later in the year around navigating conflict, et cetera, but those are all available on the website. So, and awesome. I love connecting with people. So it means a lot to me if people are on the email list or on the Instagram to reach out, send me a message, say hello. I'm an extrovert, like extreme on the spectrum. So I have a lot of capacity to know folks, and really love if somebody's listened to this conversation or connected to my work to hear about it, to make a connection, say hello.
Okay. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Great resources.
Yeah.
Thank you for this conversation. Yeah. Thank you for your time and presence. And excited to dive into these things myself. Afterwards, I'll be doing some journaling and writing. What is the purpose of all of these? And relationships. From a place of curiosity and, willingness, I think is all we need. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right.
All right.
Awesome. That's a wrap.
That's a wrap.